Okay, we've started recording. So Rida, I'll present for about an hour and a half. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. But first, let me express my deep thanks and appreciation for you being willing to give this important session about fluency, teaching fluency, because really at our schools, this is a problem, you know, the performance stage is kind of missing. So this affects the students' fluency and in general their speaking skill. So I think this will be an exciting and important session. So thank you.
I hope it's going to be useful for everybody. Okay, let me get my PowerPoint back up. Okay, that's fine. So welcome everybody and thank you for that lovely introduction, Ida. It's a pleasure to be working with you. If at any point we have any technical problems, you can't hear me, or maybe we lose the internet connection, then we'll just do our best to keep going. So I'm prepared this end for anything that might happen. Absolutely fine. There will be time at the end if you would like to ask some questions. I'd be very happy to answer those. And I hope that what I've prepared for you is going to be useful. So, developing teenage students' spoken fluency. What we'll do is have a chance for a few introductions, a little warming up activity, and then we'll get into the main part of my presentation. So, first thing, I'm sure you all know each other already. Do you all know each other?
Yeah, because it is a series of sessions, online sessions.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so this introduction in that case is something that I really like doing with teachers and with students. And it's basically explaining the story behind your name. Now, do you all remember my name?
Yeah, Julietta.
Julietta, that's it. My name's Julietta. And the reason I'm called Julietta is quite an interesting, I think, quite an interesting reason. When I was born, my father had a kind of lovely ambition, if you like, a plan, but unfortunately, he didn't have enough money to fulfill this particular plan. This is the Alfa Romeo Julietta.
Wow.
This was
the story behind your name.
Yeah, this was his dream car when I was born, but sadly he couldn't afford it. So for some reason he said to my mother, let's call our baby Julietta after the car. So that's the story of my name. I'd like all of you now, with the person sitting next to you, could you tell your neighbour very, very quickly, just in a few seconds, the reason for your name? So what's the story behind your name? Are you named after maybe one of your parents, grandparents? Are you named after somebody famous in history? Or do you have another story like me? So just very quickly, please, tell your neighbour your name story.
Yes, I can tell some, what is that story behind your name? So that you were a beautiful baby, so you were shining like the sun.
So my uncles, except for me, absolutely there is no one who shines my uncles. But I'm always on Tuesdays.
So there's a story behind your name?
Yes, I was named after a Jordanian singer. She was blind, but her voice is very nice. She's called Mason, and my dad loved this singer so much and was eager to have the same voice like this singer.
So yes. Was it okay with your mom to
yes.
name you after?
Yes, we are family. It's a cat. To love more than one.
Shall we ask you a question?
Okay, my name Rida or Satisfaction. In fact, my dad called me that name because he has a PhD in Arabic literature, so he chooses. So at the beginning, I was not happy with that name in the elementary class because it's not common and because it can be used for both men and women. So I didn't like it, but it's okay. The meaning is
Good.
good.
Satisfaction.
It's good, yeah.
Yes. My dad called me Netta as a kind of
Prosperity.
prosperity and
Yeah.
happiness.
Yeah.
Because he has suffered from lack of money and hard life. So he, as a kind of
Hope that.
hope, yes.
Yeah, prosperity.
Yes.
Okay. So lots of interesting stories, Julietta.
Lots of interesting stories. And it's interesting also the number of people who are named by their father,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why. Maybe fathers have a particular influence on names. I don't know. But anyway, thank you very much for sharing your stories. So just a few words about me. I live in the UK. I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer, and I've been lucky enough to work with teachers from Gaza before. I met them in Cairo. I think it was in 2012 maybe.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Session for teaching young learners.
Yes. Well remembered. And then I also made a number of visits to the West Bank as well when Andrew Foster was.
They're still asking about you, Jules.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
Meet you again here in Gaza, hopefully.
I know. This is a good way to connect. So we can be glad about the technology, certainly. I also have a hands-up lesson every week with Manal in Beit Hamoun School. So that's lovely, getting to know students in Gaza as well. So yeah, I feel thanks to the technology we are connected, which is great. So that's a little bit about me. All of you are secondary school teachers, am I right?
No, we have a mixed group. Some of the teachers here teach young learners, and in fact, very young learners starting from grade 1 to grade, to grade 9.
Okay, all right. So we've got quite a range. That's absolutely fine. The activities that I'm going to be doing with you are probably most suitable, I would say, for grades 6 to 9. But I think that there are many things that can be adapted for younger learners as well.
Exactly.
So hopefully it's going to be useful for everybody. In this session, it won't just be me talking. I'll be doing quite a lot of talking, but I will also be inviting you to share ideas and opinions with each other. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to hear what you're saying, but maybe if people want to come directly to the...
come here close to the speaker and they can express their ideas.
Great.
Perfect.
That would be good. So if everybody's ready, let's make a start.
Yeah.
All right. I thought I'd start with a warmer. Now, this warmer is designed, obviously, to encourage fluency. And I'll explain how you're going to do it. I'm going to show you some pictures. And when you see the picture, I want you to work with your partner. So it's best if there are 2 people working, or everybody working in pairs. If you make a group of 3, that's fine. I mean, you can, one person can maybe be one character and the other 2 people can share the character, or you can include a 3rd character. It doesn't matter. But I would like you, as you see the pictures, I would like you to just begin a conversation. I want you to imagine what the 2 people are saying to each other. All right? And I'll let you talk for just a few seconds, and then I'm going to change the pictures, and I would like you to also change the conversation according to the characters. So I suggest with your partner, you choose either to be the character on the left or on the right. So you will then change your conversation according to the characters that you see. Should we try?
Yeah, let's give it a try.
Let's give it a try. All right then. So everybody, you've got your partner, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I will join Ayman. Okay.
Oh, thank you. All right, so I'm going to show you the first pictures, and I'd like you, when you see the pictures, to imagine what these people are saying to each other and have a very short little conversation. Here you go.
I will be the woman and you will be I guess that's something wrong with you. So can you make
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll stop there. So how did you get on with that warm-up? Was it, were the instructions clear? Yeah? All right. So maybe when you do an activity like this, the instructions need to be clear. The pictures themselves need to be appropriate. So these pictures I chose because you are obviously adults, and I chose pictures that were appropriate, I hoped, for your experience and for your understanding, if you like, of the world and the different situations. If I was doing this with teenagers, I would choose different pictures, and I would hopefully choose pictures and situations that would be relevant to them and would encourage them to speak. In terms of the language that you used, now I didn't give you any preparation at all because you're teachers and you have the language skills that are necessary. But probably if I was doing this with a group of teenage learners or young learners, then it would be useful to prepare them beforehand, maybe with some useful vocabulary that is kind of appropriate to the pictures, and also some grammatical structures as well. So this activity is short. You can't let it go on for too long because students will lose interest. It does require some preparation, but it can, according to the pictures you use, can be very motivating for students. Okay, so let's have a think about what we're going to do in this workshop together. We'll talk about how we motivate our students to speak, using their experience, their imagination, and also their opinions. Students in our classrooms have a lot of ideas about things. And I think part of the challenge of getting students to speak fluently is to give them the right sort of topics. So we'll think a little bit about how we can motivate them to speak through different topics and activities. Now, I want to actually give you some examples of speaking activities. We are going to try things out together because I think if you do that, you'll be able to understand how the activity works and hopefully be able to try it with your own students. Another important aspect of developing students' fluency is how we give feedback. So I'm also going to give you some suggestions for how we can give constructive feedback to students on what they've actually produced. So when you give them some kind of fluency activity, what sort of feedback do they need so that they can continue to improve and hopefully develop their fluency further? So that's our plan. I hope that that's going to be useful and relevant to you. So let's make a start. How do we encourage speaking in class? Let's have a little think about how we do that. I'd like you, first of all, to just share with your partner how you encourage your students to speak. So what kind of activities do you do? What kind of behavior do you actually exhibit to encourage speaking in class? Can I give you maybe just 2 minutes to share your ideas with your partner?
Okay.
Another thing, you can provide them with vocabulary and the structure they need with the task, so that will yes, exactly. What else? Because in the first activity, she didn't give us enough time, so she subscribed it, so I didn't finish.
Yeah, and there are some examples. Yeah.
Okay, lots of good ideas are emerging everywhere.
Lovely. I would love to hear some of these ideas. So Rida, maybe would you invite somebody to come and share their ideas?
Anybody? So starting from, okay, Ala, would you please come here?
Okay. Well, thank you. My name is Ala.
Hello.
Aladdin. Okay. Well, regarding encouraging speaking in classes, we've suggested like some ideas, me and Mr. Raymond. I mean, the first one is giving pictures similar to what we have did, like what we have given, previously. And we ask students to describe them. As you know, like in our curriculum, we have lots of pictures even in each lesson. So we could ask students to talk about them, to give their opinions. And this is like a kind of speaking. The second thing is giving an example of dialogue. For example, like we have lots of dialogues in the book. So we could let them imitate these dialogues and write similar ones. At the end is given a topic. For example, if you're teaching a grammatical rule, we could ask them to bring things they have already know or from their own experiences. So for example, if they're talking about past simple, we could let them talk about what happened yesterday with them. So that they're talking about from their own experiences. And that's like to intermingle their own experiences with the learning they are having in this class. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I really like the emphasis that you're giving on the practice that students need, and also bringing their own opinions and experience into the classroom. Dialogues, yes, dialogues are a great way of developing students' fluency. And as you say, getting students to write their own dialogues is great. So thank you very much. Some good ideas. I like them. Hello.
Hello, my name is Ragda.
Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. Okay, my name is Ragda. I teach grade 1, from grade 1 to grade 4. First, I can encourage speaking from first grade to fourth grade by storytelling, not as a kind of story, but for example, we have in grade 4, we have something about ourselves. Tell us about yourself. This is a kind of storytelling, and a kind of drilling in the first stages. For example, what's your favorite hobby? My favorite hobby is swimming. My favorite hobby is reading. So substituting some words in order to use drilling. And the third thing is by using pictures or song. They keep the song, so they can imitate and repeat other songs, so they can encourage themselves to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Again, some really great ideas and appropriate to the grades that you're teaching. So storytelling, certainly, I mean, that's a great way of motivating students. They listen, then maybe they can act out the story, they can add their own ideas. Drilling, definitely, it's a great way of developing students' fluency and also their confidence, which is important. So thank you. Again, I really like these ideas. Okay, let's hear maybe just one more. Hello.
Hi, I'm Maison Shamia.
Nice to meet you.
I say I can stimulate motivation to the speakers by using different approaches and techniques. We can use either audio things like listening to songs, for example, and I ask students, what is your comment? Do you like it? Is it exciting? Is it boring? And I can use visual things like pictures, posters, like facial expressions, acting. I think that I must be the starter in the speaking activities to break the barrier between me and my students and to overwhelm my students with confidence and relaxation. And I think that I may use things related to my students' interest and imagination, for example, and the real life also. For example, we can use topics like football players. In a lesson like goal, I ask a student to come in front of the class and to be Messi. You are Messi, and we are going to ask you some questions. And this really motivates them so much, and they like the topic. I can give them a chance to narrate a story from their real life or their imagination, and I accept all their mistakes. And I feel that the interaction between me and my students is a key of success in this domain. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, some great ideas. I like your emphasis on, what interests students, because we are more motivated to share our ideas if we have a topic that we find interesting. So if it's football or if it's something which is relevant to them, then they are, we hope, going to be more interested in speaking and interacting. So thank you, some great ideas. Hello.
Hello, my name is Fadwan Sallam. I teach 5th grade. Okay, I have 3 ideas about how to improve speaking activities for our students. First one, to give them some pictures to help them to express their ideas. Number 2, to write some words to help them to express their feelings and emotions or their ideas as well. So to write, for example, from 8 to 10 words to help them using them in saying their sentences, okay? Number 3, using retelling stories and using games. The 4th thing is to work in pairs or groups to help low achievers to express their ideas. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. So again, I like the ideas of using visuals, pictures to stimulate students' imagination, or maybe use pictures to activate their own knowledge about a topic. All of that is great. You also mentioned working in pairs and groups, and certainly if we want our students to practice speaking as much as possible, then creating opportunities for pair and group work is a good idea. However, if you have a large class, and I wonder how many students you have in your classes, what's the average number?
We have about, the average is 45 students per class.
Yeah, that's quite large. And if you have all the students speaking together, you know, working in pairs or groups, many teachers will say, oh, it's too noisy. You know, other teachers are complaining about my classroom. And I think, again, teachers have to decide how you create the right balance between giving students a chance to practice, but also being aware of the noise that you generate in your classroom. But I love your ideas.
Because I guess that letting students speak in groups before speaking in public, that will provide a kind of comfortable atmosphere and a relaxing atmosphere, and that encourages shy and not confident students to speak. So it is good to let them work in pairs or in groups before calling them to work to demonstrate and speak in public. Personalization is very important, as Mason said. Let them talk about something that matters, that they feel interested in. This is important. They said something about providing or scaffolding and providing them with the vocabulary and the structure they need. And just one thing to say, as an educational specialist, I think that giving them enough time to do the task is very important, because it's really frustrating when you see the students are engrossed, involved in a speaking activity, and the teacher says, that's enough, just let's move.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I think you've touched on a lot of very useful points there, Vida. I mean, certainly personalizing the topic is important. We'll look at some activities which are personalized topics, if you like. Timing, I agree. I mean, you know, teachers have to be very aware either of making the activity too long or making it too short, because I think both have, you know, negative effects on students. So somehow teachers, I think we're very good at judging how long an activity needs to go on for. But I agree, if you cut it off when students are still working, there can be a slight frustration. But on the other hand, maybe it's good to stop an activity before students start talking about other things or start, you know, chatting about the weekend in Arabic, which is not what you want. So you're right, it's a very delicate kind of balance that you have to strike. So everybody, thank you very much for your ideas. I'll just show you a couple of points that I've kind of collected over the years, some of which you may already have discussed. So some of you mentioned the idea of yourselves, you know, interacting with students, encouraging students. And I think something that you can do is to, in a very gentle way, encourage English only in the classroom. I suspect many of you already do this because of your own excellent levels of English. But, you know, you are a role model for your students. So if you're speaking English with them, this will hopefully encourage them to do the same. So yes, acting as a good model, saying, you know, this is an English only zone in the classroom, and you yourself are willing to do that. How many of you use language posters, the kind of phrases that teachers often put around the room to help students? Things like a poster which says, how do I say in English? Or typical kind of classroom language. Do any of you use those with your students?
Yeah, I've noticed that some of the teachers here use posters to focus on the frequent language, like may I go out, or work in pairs, work in groups.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, classroom language, yeah. Yeah, so they put them in posters so they can be seen all the time by the students, so they will be encouraged to use them or respond to them.
That's right. And then after a while, they get so familiar with the language, they use it in class, that you can then change the posters, make new posters to keep kind of pushing them with particular classroom language, which is useful. It's great if some of you are already doing that. Planning to include communication activities to practice target language. I think, Ala, you mentioned about the past simple, about giving students an opportunity to actually practice particular grammar structures, and I think this is really important. Lots of activities are based around a particular grammar structure. So when you're speaking, we always, whatever we do in the classroom involves grammar, it involves vocabulary, and it's good if activities have a particular grammar focus. This is useful. Again, it depends on the level of your learners. Explaining to your students the importance of communication in learning. I mean, I think students need to know that they're practicing speaking because English is a skill. It's different from other subjects like maths or geography or physics, because it is actually the skill of communication, whether it's through reading, writing, speaking, or listening. So explaining to students why they're practicing speaking in class, I think, is important. With very young learners, of course, you can do this in their mother tongue. As your learners get older and they get better at understanding English, it may be something you want to do with them in English. But explaining why they're doing things, I think, has a place in the classroom. Now, many of you have already explained to me the kind of activities that you do, and they sound natural and enjoyable to me. So any activities you use which build on students' experience, their kind of imagination, the topics that you choose which are interesting for them, all of this makes speaking an enjoyable activity. You're quite right when you say students sometimes feel a little bit nervous about speaking. It is a risky thing to do, to open your mouth and say something in a foreign language. Some shy students find this very, very hard. So the more you can make activities enjoyable, I think the more motivated they'll be. Something which I'm sure many of you do, organising drama clubs or debating clubs or some kind of public speaking. Is that something that you are doing in your schools?
For sure, with hands-on project, lots of schools are having or are running drama clubs, and this is an opportunity to let students speak.
Yes, yes, that's true. And I've been lucky enough to see some of the plays that the students have produced.
And Julietta, you have mentioned something very important, the communicative activities, because whatever you are dealing with, whether you are teaching speaking or listening, reading, or even a grammar lesson, so we end up with a production stage, and this stage gives space for students to be engaged in communicative activities. And even when you are doing a listening lesson, so if you're having a text about shopping, you will end with a role play or with problem solving or whatever activity you find appropriate to engage your students in a personalized activity. And we do that in reading too. We end the reading with a post-reading activity that involves lots of speaking and communicative activities.
Absolutely. So what you're talking about there, Ida, is the integration of skills, and you're absolutely right. I mean, in real life, you know, we tend to read something and then tell our friends or our family what we read. We may listen to something and then decide we want to read a newspaper or magazine article about what we heard. So you're absolutely right. It's a natural way of integrating or combining the skills. And students, I think they get used to this when we do this in class. And I think they then see how the skills are all connected. You're absolutely right. And it's a very important thing for teachers to do.
And Julietta, we have some teachers here. They are having online sessions with volunteers all over the world. Sahar is doing an online session. Ron is doing with third graders, fourth graders. Sahar is doing Luzanne, Amal, you know Amal. She has been to you. I know, but you've seen her. Her students won the drama club competition.
Ah, okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is. Sorry, were you saying something? I'm just trying to hear the sound. No, you were okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. This is great. So any kind of interaction or online activities you can do either with you and other teachers or with your students, other students. This is great. Okay, shall we move on?
Okay.
All right, let's go on. So, thinking a little bit about how we engage learners in this process. I've got 3 areas that I'm going to be focusing on in our workshop today. So these are ideas that you've already mentioned, which is fantastic. You're all very well informed and experienced teachers, I can see. When we're thinking about activities to do with our students, I think these 3 areas can be helpful. So we think about students' experience, students' imagination, and students' opinions. And when I say these 3 things, what do I mean by these? So students' experience can be around personalized themes, as you've already mentioned. Teenagers particularly are very concerned with themselves, and I think personalization for any learners is a very motivating aspect of what you can do in class. Imagination, so thinking about topics and maybe looking at it from a slightly new or different angle. This again can stimulate students and hopefully tap into their creativity, their imaginative processes, and hopefully get them thinking. Something that all students have, even the youngest learners, are opinions. You know with your grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 students, they know what they like, they know what they don't like. They have really quite strong opinions about a lot of different things. So if we can bring that into the classroom at a very simple level with younger learners, and then at a more sophisticated level with older learners, I think students will respond positively. So this is probably obvious to everybody. The best way to motivate students is through enjoyable and interesting activities. We know in our classes that there are times when we have to get students to prepare for exams, when they have to do things that they don't like. But if we can try as much as possible to create activities which are interesting for them and enjoyable, we know that they're going to learn better. So I'm going to take each of these areas one by one, and we're going to do some activities around them. Okay, so our first one, using students' experience through personalization. You'll see some teaching tips popping up from time to time. Probably for many of you, these will just be reminders for things that you're already doing. Teaching tip, talk to your students about speaking. So as I mentioned earlier, I think it is useful to share kind of the skill and the kind of the practice of speaking with your students. Tell them how you learn. Tell them what you were like when you were studying, when you were their age in school, and what helped you to actually learn to speak English well. I think students appreciate hearing that from their teacher. Here's another tip. Give your students a choice. We often find with our textbooks, our course books, that there isn't a choice about what students can do. But I think giving students a choice about what they speak about and the topics maybe that they talk about, I think can be motivating. So here's an example of an activity, a speaking activity, where students have choice. I've got here a list of topics. I'd like you to look at the topics and I'd like you to read them. And then I'd like you to choose two that you would like to talk about with your partner. All right, so just take a minute to read them. And when you're ready, I'd like to give you just a few, just very short, just a minute or two with your partner to talk about the topics that you have chosen. Okay.
Sport you like watching, gymnastics. Something you enjoy doing you're watching movie. They're doing that school. Something you spend a lot of time doing. Working on yes. Somebody you do with meeting. Somebody don't like to be alone. Walking, should have a partner. You just this place, some people are stop doing.
Okay, done.
Thank you.
Interesting questions.
Well, I like this activity because you're giving students a lot of choice. You would obviously choose topics that they would be interested in, but giving them that choice means that they choose what they want to talk about. And I think this is obviously going to encourage students. It will motivate them more if they can talk about something that they actually want to talk about. I think in the classroom we often, you know, for various reasons, we get our students to talk about things that they are interested in, but sometimes things that they're not interested in, just because our course book has a particular topic and we have to do it. And that's part of learning. That's not a problem. But where it's possible to give students the chance to talk about themselves, to talk about things which are of personal interest to them, then I think you do have more chance of success and hopefully of students enjoying the actual speaking process. Now, when you get your students to engage in a speaking activity, we do obviously want to prepare them with the necessary vocabulary, the necessary grammatical structures, and we also want our students to sound more natural when they speak. And I believe this can be done really from, from the earliest grades. Obviously, the language that they use will be very, very simple, but I think sounding more natural is one of our aims as teachers. So, how can we help our students to sound more natural? I'm going to be presenting to you these little words or phrases which are called gambits. Have you met this word before, a gambit?
It's like chunks of language instead of separate words?
Yes, yes, exactly. So little gambit is a phrase, maybe, as you say, a word or a group of words, a chunk, and we use them in our conversations in informal language particularly, as a way of sounding natural. Every language has gambits. You will have them in Arabic, we have them in English, you'll have them in French, Japanese, or whatever. So, what do they look like and how do we use them? Have a look at this little dialogue.
From Spain. Why did you come to London to study? What are you studying?
Yes. Short answers. Because
Yeah.
some teachers insist on giving complete answers, and that doesn't sound natural. So as long as they convey the answer or the message, that's it. But I guess gambit more like
doesn't sound like to be a natural one.
like kind of, they use kind of or well and.
Yeah, you get fillers. You mean get fillers?
Not gap fillers, but phrases native speakers usually use. Well, or kind of, or
Yeah, you see, I think the problem with this dialogue is that it's very typical of dialogues that you find in your course book. It's obviously useful because it's practicing questions and you've got particular, language focus, for example, present continuous. What are you studying? How long are you planning to stay, etc. So it's a good dialogue because it's useful to practice particular language points, but does it sound natural?
So let's see the same conversation with.
Yeah. So I would like you to practice this dialogue again with your neighbour, but I'm going to introduce some natural gambits. Okay. So this is the kind of thing we say in real life. Phrases like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Wow, really? You're joking. That's great. What about you? Well, I see. Oh no, is that right? Good grief. Okay, good grief is a phrase we use to show surprise.
Good grief. Surprise. Oh. So this is the gambit.
Yeah, so you've got your gambits on the right. So I would like you now, just very quickly, just take a minute or two with your partner to practice this dialogue, but where possible, can you include one or two of those gambits? So you can decide which ones you want to add, but if you add any of them to the conversation, it will sound more natural, I can promise you. So have a try now, see which ones you would like to include.
That's really interesting. Why did you come to me? What about you? What do you start session?
Okay, thank you everybody. I can hear the conversations. They already sound much more natural. They sound like the kind of conversation that I would have with a friend or with somebody that I haven't met before. So I think when you get your students practicing dialogues, and when, as you say, you get them to write their own dialogues, you can make sure that they include these kind of natural gambits in their conversations, because this is the way that they're going to sound more natural and sound more fluent. If you Google gambits, conversational gambits, you will get lots and lots of different phrases online, so that there are plenty of websites out there which will give you the kind of little useful phrases that you need. If you maybe narrow your search and put in something like gambits for introducing yourself, gambits for describing a place, or something like that, give yourself a particular topic or focus, then there will be these kind of phrases available for you to include. And you probably know many yourself as well, just from your own knowledge of English. Now, something else that you find, again, you often find in your textbooks is this typical speech. And I've called it typical speech in EFL-land. And I'll give you some examples and we'll see how many of these are familiar to you. You often see this kind of question in your course book. What do you like doing in? What do you think is the next part?
Phrase like in free time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very typical question. You know, what about this one?
You have $1 million.
You want
That's right. So yeah, what would you do if you won $1 million? You won the lottery. Okay, absolutely. You know these. And I think, your students probably can predict them as well. Have you ever met what? Or who?
Have you ever met famous person?
Yeah. Typical.
It is sunny tomorrow. Where will you go? Where will you go? Oh, I will.
What are you gonna wear?
So easy to predict. If it is sunny tomorrow,
Yeah, if it's sunny tomorrow, we'll go to the beach, we'll go for a picnic. It's typical phrases that you find in course books everywhere.
This is
Anybody know the answer?
There was an explosion in Gaza. While I was working, I was so this is very interesting.
I know, but you know, it's interesting the way that you're able to finish these sentences, probably because you've seen them many times. So we want to do something different. We want to kind of stimulate our students. We want to do things which don't always seem completely typical or predictable. So what about a new approach? Have a look at these. Just read this, sorry. Have a look at these we're practicing the second conditional here, but rather than the typical way of practicing the second conditional, look at this. I think this is quite interesting. Again, with your neighbour, you have to try and guess what you think your partner would do. So if you won a lot of money, I think the first thing you'd buy would be, and you have to try and guess what your partner would buy, okay? So take a minute to read these, and I don't know how well you know your neighbour sitting next to you, but see if you can guess the answers to these correctly. So take some time to read them, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes to talk.
Okay.
Thank you. So, you know, we all need to practice the second conditional with our students, but, you know, how do we do it so that students are motivated and interested to actually speak? So I hope that this activity would be a slightly different way of approaching it, and it would be enjoyable, interesting, personalized for students. Okay, so we've thought a little bit about using students' experience in the classroom and doing that through personalized themes. Thinking a little bit about students' imagination and new angles, new ways of looking at things. What kind of activities could we do? Okay, how many of you like to use role play in class? Do you know what I mean by role play?
Yeah.
Yeah? you're fine with that. Okay, I think if students are practicing dialogues, and as you've said, they can write their own dialogues, then once they've got sufficient confidence and they have enough vocabulary and enough grammar knowledge, they can then start to develop their own drama activities, and role play is definitely one of those things. So I'm going to show you a little activity which you can do. It requires a little bit of artistic skill, but I'm not a great artist and I've managed to do this, so I'm sure you'll be much, much better than me. You have to make 2 cubes using a template. Okay, so I've got my cubes here, can you see?
Yeah.
All right then, very, very easy. You can see the template here. I found it online. You just print out an A4 sheet. It's best if you can use card. I used paper, but this would be no good for the classroom because they're very, very soft. Whereas if you use card, they will be stronger and you'll be able to use them for the whole lesson and hopefully for longer. And you'll be able to use them again and again. So you need to make 2 cubes. On your cubes, you use 1 for character and 1 for places. Okay, and I'll show you what I've put on each of my cubes in a second. You put students in groups of 4, and then students have to roll this dice to decide the place and characters, and then prepare a conversation. Okay, so I'll give you an example. On this cube, this is the character. I've got student, child, singer, clown, doctor, waiter. That's all of them. And then on my places cube, I've got cinema, school, party, forest, circus, cafe. I think that's all of them. All right, so basically you've got 6 of each. Now, your students work in groups. Each group has 2 cubes, and in the groups, students have to throw their cube, and each student will then choose a character depending on what they throw. They then throw the place, and this will tell them where the actual conversation or the role play is happening. So if I show you, sorry, let's just go back. Here we go. So suggested characters and places. So on the left, you can choose from any of those. And on the right, you've got different places. Again, you could choose from those. You would need 6 to put on your cubes. All right, so if we just go back here, I've included a teaching tip, allow thinking time. As you know, when you ask students to role play, you've got to give them time to prepare. If you just say, okay, you're a student and you're in a forest, then students don't have any time to prepare. It's very hard for them to think about what the conversation is going to be. So they need time to think. They need some preparation in terms of vocabulary, maybe useful grammar structures. And when they've had the time to think and to prepare, they're then ready to actually act out their role play. So if we have a look here, I'd like you to try this now. I'm afraid we've got the dice, the cubes here. If you're happy for me to throw these, I will then ask you to imagine your situation according to the place and the kind of conversation that you would have. So let's start with our characters. Would you like to work in groups of 3?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, it's all right.
Okay, so new groups now. If you'd like to just make your little groups of 3. Okay, and I'm going to start by throwing my cue to decide who your characters are. Okay, now please remember, if you were my students, you would have your own cues, but because we're doing this online, I've just got the one cue. So I've thrown the cue, and one character is a doctor. I've thrown the cue, one character is a clown. I've thrown the cube, one student is a singer. Okay, so these are our characters, clown, doctor, singer. Now, I'm going to throw the cube to decide on the place. Oh, it's the circus. All right, so clown, student, doctor, your place is the circus. Have a little bit of time to think about what conversation you're going to have. And then I'd like you to, just very briefly, just 1 or 2 minutes, act out your role play. Okay, everybody. I think you get the idea, yeah, about how this activity works. So I think
it's kind of problem solving. If you get a doctor and a singer and a clown in a circus, so you first need to figure out what's going on. So this is really interesting.
Well, it's true. I mean, I think students would be quite good at this because they have the imagination to do it. But I think the advantage of this activity is that if students make their own cubes, they can decide on which characters they want to put on their cubes. They can decide the places. So it becomes a very student-centered activity. And when they've made their cubes, and when they, you can make the cube, but when they've actually written the different things on the cube, it's then up to them to create a role play around that. And I know that your students are incredibly imaginative, and they have some really, really good ideas. So if you like this idea yourself, it might be worth trying with your students. Again, with very young learners, I think role play, it's a little bit too challenging. I think it's good with very young learners to keep to dialogues and to get them to practice simple dialogues. But when they've been learning with you for a number of years, why not give them the freedom and the choice to be able to do a role play, something similar like this. Okay, thank you everybody for your participation. Okay, so we've come to our final area to consider, which is how you involve students' opinions in class and what controversial ideas you might want to bring into the classroom to get students talking. What about debates? Okay, now.
The debate may be revolving around themes of the unit. For example, if the unit is about modern technology, students can debate about the good part or good sides and bad sides of technology. Or if it is about football, debate between teams, seasons, spring and summer for elementary stages.
Yes.
About healthy food and junk food.
Yes, absolutely. These are all good topics.
Day and night. Day and night. Wow. Yeah.
Exactly. So you choose the topics that you think would be, interesting for your students. Maybe you even invite your students to suggest topics that they would like to debate. And in this way, you can create a kind of lively discussion in class. I did the story of Jebene with my class in the Kanun school, and it was very interesting because at the end, I asked the class, do you think Jebene should marry the rich landowner? And they had some very, very interesting ideas about generally, no, they thought that she should be an independent woman. He only loved her because she was beautiful, and it was a really interesting discussion. So keeping those kind of things in mind, I've got some provocative or controversial statements here, which are related to my little picture that you can see at the top of the screen. So we do want to be a little bit controversial sometimes. We want students to think a little bit about their own world, their own kind of lives, their own society. And to do that, we need to kind of spark interest in the topic. So I've chosen a topic which I find interesting, but obviously you choose topics that you find interesting or your students would find interesting. So these are all statements about men and women. Men and women can do most jobs equally. Some jobs are more suited to women. Women should be paid the same as men for the same work. Is it better to be a boy or a girl in today's world? Now, I don't want you to discuss these, but these are the kind of statements that you could make about the topic, the topic of gender, if you like. And I'm thinking here with students probably in grades, 7 to 9. So we're talking about kind of, higher level of students for this particular language I'm using here. However, you may think that this topic could be suitable for younger learners, but you would have to obviously present it in a simplified or easier way. So let's assume that you've chosen your topic for your debate and you want your students to then plan what they're going to say, whether it's going to be a group discussion or a whole class discussion, whether it's quite formal with people proposing or giving their opinion, or whether it's more informal where students are simply sharing their opinions together. Whatever you do with your students, they do need help with language. So a teaching tip is pre-teaching useful vocabulary. If you have a topic like this, which is basically around gender, then you will need to give your students some useful words. things like to be sexist or to discriminate, if you like, against people because of their biological sex. A new man. I wonder if you've met this expression, a new man. Do you know what a new man is?
Not sure.
We describe a new man is somebody who, for example, likes to do the cooking, maybe helps at home with the cleaning, looking after the children.
Modern husband.
That's right. Don't worry, there are not so many of them, but it is an expression. And if you say, oh, you know, you're so lucky, your husband is a new man, it means that he does all of these helpful things at home. Equal pay. So again, if students want to talk about the economic situation and how men and women should be paid the same money for the work that they do, they would need this expression before they start their discussion. A phrase like to discriminate against someone. So again, when your students are reaching the higher levels, maybe grade 7, 8, 9 and beyond, these kind of words and expressions will be useful for them when they actually have their debates. Now, we're coming back to our gambits. Remember, we looked at some natural sounding gambits before. These are gambits for discussing opinions. So I'd like to show you the groups of gambits I've collected, and I'd like you to tell me what aspect of discussion they would be used for. So if you have expressions like, what I think is, I believe that, I'm convinced that, to my mind, if you ask me, the thing is, why would students use those particular gambits? What is their purpose?
I guess they provide the needed language to carry on the conversation in a more natural way.
Yes.
So I agree. Exactly.
That's it. So do you think these phrases are used for agreeing, disagreeing, or giving your opinion?
Giving your opinion, yeah.
Yeah,
when you
absolutely. So all of those are things that you can use for giving your opinion. And what's good about them is that they are very natural. They're the kind of things that I use when I have discussions with my friends. So we want to share them with our students. What about these?
Yeah, responding or just agreeing or disagreeing or
Good. Yeah, that's it. So they are agreeing phrases. And I've included some which are quite informal. Things like, that's exactly what I was thinking.
you hit
Yeah.
the nail on the head.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. All right. So this is a kind of colloquial expression, and it means that's exactly, you know, that's exactly what I agree also, that you've hit the nail on the head. Basically, you know, like hitting a nail with your hammer, and it means you're accurate. You're absolutely right. So those are all useful gambits for agreeing. So obviously these are for
Disagreeing, you must be joking. Yeah. Different ways of stating disagreement.
Yeah, exactly. And you notice in English, we never like to actually say to somebody, you're wrong. And we do occasionally say, well, I disagree. But we tend to be rather sensitive, if you like, to this. So we say funny things. We say funny things like, I agree up to a point, but. In other words, I disagree, but we're very kind of polite about it. So there are ways, sorry, yes?
Even the disagreement can be graded, like you can be sharp, like, come on, or no way, or you've got a point, but I agree up to a point, but. So.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. So you can see that some of these are expressing kind of stronger disagreement, and some of them are are much more kind of, you know, neutral. You're absolutely right. So if you say no way, then that is clearly strong disagreement. Yeah, all right. But something like, yeah, you've got a point, but is much more neutral. So if we provide these...
we have just 3 minutes to go.
Oh my goodness. Okay, does that mean, Vida, yeah, we'll stop in 3 minutes in that case.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. And what I can do is I can, if you like, I can send you the PowerPoint slide as a PDF.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So your students can, sorry, not your students. Everybody is welcome to see what I've got here. In that case, let's just spend the last couple of minutes talking about your role as a giver of constructive feedback. So when your students are talking and they're engaged in an activity, what exactly do you do? So I think giving feedback on mistakes is absolutely vital to the whole process of developing students' fluency. Students, they expect you to correct them, but how do you correct them? That is the question. So I've got an example here of a student's mistake. Yeah, my father has a long hair. We've all heard our students say funny things like that. And I'm going to show you different ways that teachers respond. And I'd like you, with your partner, to decide which of these responses by the teacher are useful. So teacher 1 says no.
No.
Teacher 2 says no. Anyone? Teacher 3 says good. Teacher 4 says no article. Teacher 5 says he has
Prompting, yeah, this is good.
Teacher 6 says he has long hair.
Yeah,
Teacher 7 says just one, like this, and the teacher draws a picture of a bald man with one long hair.
No, I guess this is making fun of his dad. It's not that good.
Teacher 8 says, oh, he's got long hair.
Yeah, reformulating.
Okay, and teacher 9 says, yeah, I used to have long hair myself. All right, so just briefly, with your partner, decide which ones you think are useful for students.
Reformulating is good, and echoing or repeating the statement or questioning intonation, so you give the chance to the student to correct himself, to think again and correct himself. But saying no, this is no. And that long hair, the sketch with the one hair, it is making fun of the student because he's talking about his dad. So this is
But it could be like
not appropriate.
Number 5 is okay.
5 is okay. He has. You are encouraging the student to like echoing. Reproduce. Yeah, exactly. So. So we have more than one good option.
Yeah, there may be certainly more than one good one. Are there any where you would say it's not helpful? This is not encouraging or useful for the student?
So saying no or no anyone, or I guess this will undermine the student's confidence.
It could be, yeah. I mean, all of these are possible responses. And as I've heard you saying, you know, some of them I think are more useful than others. So which ones would you use yourselves? Which ones are typical for your own correction feedback?
Maybe I would say, oh, he's got long hair. Maybe this is a good way of editing.
Okay, so like teacher 8, you mean like reformulating?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that can work very well. I think if your students know that this is your technique, your feedback strategy, I think it can work very well, because the idea is that they will then listen and they will copy what you've said, so they get the correct version, you know, kind of presented to them. I think that's helpful.
But sometimes saying good, you are encouraging or giving positive feedback on the sentence as a whole. Then afterwards, you may deal with the mistakes afterwards. So good, okay, you are tolerating this mistake. It has something good and something
It will be taken for
bad.
granted later.
Uh-huh.
Be taken for students.
But sometimes you're saying good for the whole sentence, then afterwards you
if it's a bit a mistake, you could do something.
but you miss an opportunity for correcting your student. It depends. It depends. If it is a fluency or an accuracy activity.
When you say he has, maybe if the student is so intelligent, maybe he's get another example. He would not say he has long hair, he said black hair, no hair. So he said something else.
So you are encouraging that. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
I think number 3, teacher 3 is an interesting one. You're right. We don't know the kind of the situation. But I imagine that this teacher maybe is being very encouraging to a very shy student. Maybe this student has not spoken, you know, for the whole term, and then they very kind of bravely say, my father has a long hair, you know, and we don't know exactly why the teacher said this, but it's possible that you're right. The teacher was encouraging the student for some reason. And so there is a place sometimes for giving students positive feedback, even if their mistake is still present in what they say. So I like these. I think all of them have, you know, sort of advantages and disadvantages, and probably there are techniques there which you also use with your students. Let's finish off then, just with this idea of when students practice some kind of speaking activity in class. I think that there are 4 steps that we as teachers can take. We want to give them feedback on the content. So we want to acknowledge, if you like, what they said. So if you ask them to debate something or discuss something or do a role play, you want to give them feedback on what they did. We want to give them feedback on the grammar and how accurate their grammar was. If, as you said, Rida, if there was an accuracy focus to what they were doing. We want to give them feedback also on the vocabulary they use, because often students need input with vocabulary. They paraphrase, they don't know the word, and some of them are good at actually keeping the fluency going. But at the end of the activity, give them the word that they needed, give them the word that they didn't know, and that means that they learn next time they can use that word and hopefully build their vocabulary that way. And we also want to give them feedback on their pronunciation. So if you notice any particular problems that students have with particular words, particular sounds, then I think it's a benefit to the whole class if they get some feedback from you on how they can improve their pronunciation in some way. Well, I think if that's our time, I'm happy to finish there. If anybody has time to stay on for questions, or if you need to leave because you're going to your class, I'm totally happy. What would you prefer to do?
Julietta, we all want to stay, but we have to evacuate this venue now.
I see.
Thank you very much for this interesting session. So
Thank you.
Time for quick question. If you next time, I guess there's an opportunity to contact people for more questions.
What I can do, there's my email address.
Okay.
All right. So by all means, send me an email if you have any questions. I'll be able to send you maybe some links to some useful articles, or maybe answer your question directly. So do by all means keep in touch. It would be lovely to hear from you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. And thank you, Rida, for being such a fantastic coordinator and helping me.
Bye. See you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.